Well, good day to you. I've been thinking about living in smaller spaces for years. When you think about living in a mobile home, a Class C RV, living in a tiny home, there are a lot of reasons for doing it, a lot of advantages. But it's something that you want to think about, like really research well and consider, and even try out if you can. So, this video is about trying out a tiny home space. Stanley and I went to visit Ireland and we stayed in a tiny home. And I found it by looking at Airbnb and specifically selecting tiny homes. And that's how we found our place. Now, Airbnb Tiny Homes is a neat website to look at because you can get an idea of where you can live in tiny homes almost anywhere in the world. And also, it's kind of fun just perusing around, looking at the different places, dreaming a little bit where you might stay, where you might go. And it's a great way to practice out living in a small space. Plus, look at that. You can even get some decorating ideas. Do you see that TV and dresser in the closet area? What a neat idea. So we packed our suitcases. I had one checked bag which was lost for the duration of my trip and came back to me 2 weeks after I got home. Stanley simply packed a carry on bag. You can see it in the picture there, it's purple, and that worked well for him. I'm the only one that had a checked bag. I had one carry on bag with me, but what I tend to carry with me is a quilt and a pillow and maybe a few essentials. So I do think I have one change of clothing in that carry on bag. The rest of my clothing, lost. We arrived in the dark, but I had seen pictures of the tiny home, so I had a pretty good idea what it looked like. Our host was amazing. He had all the lights on ready for us to arrive, which was at 10 p.m. He had barbecued ribs for us, created a salad, gave us a bottle of Italian wine. He was a perfect host. And the next morning, he actually brought breakfast to our door. It was so sweet. And that night, he invited us to a barbecue with his mom and a friend. He was the perfect host. His name was Marty. Here it is, a video of our room. There's my favorite traveling quilt on the bed with a great skylight, lots of light, and there were darkening shades that we could pull down for privacy in the evening or any time of the day. Actually, we were in Ireland for 10 days and the weather was amazing. Every time I've gone to Ireland to visit my husband's family, it's rained. But this time, 10 days, we had amazingly warm temperatures. So we had to actually pull down the shades sometimes just to keep the place cool. Stanley's brother Noel offered to be our chauffeur, and our first trip was south of Belfast down into Newcastle. Now, I've been there before, but as I said, it was often in the rain. This was a wonderful, sunny drive. I noticed that in Ireland, at least Northern Ireland, a lot of things seem to be smaller. I think a lot of them really do know how to live with less. They have smaller spaces, smaller kitchens, smaller fridges, and they manage very well. In the video there, you can begin to see the mountains of Mourne. As a young fellow, my husband, almost said my son, my husband climbed up those mountains. It probably takes about 2 hours to reach the peak. And he said that you want to take water with you because, and a sandwich, because by the time you get up there, you want to eat and hydrate. Back to our tiny home visit. Our host lived in a big house next door, and we stayed in what used to be the garage, which he had completely renovated. It was basically a bed sitting room, lots of space. We had the use of a barbecue and a patio and a great view of the loch, Strandford Loch. There's the bedroom, closet, The sliding doors there had the bathroom behind it. There was plants in there, which just give it a bit of life. A nice little fridge, cozy area for sitting. There was the television. Not that we watched it much, hardly at all, actually. Our visit was really about just enjoying the surroundings and enjoying the room. There was tea and coffee in the corner, kettle, microwave, and of course the great doors that opened up to a wonderful view. We actually rearranged the furniture a little bit. I like to do that because I like to sit it the way it's convenient for us. So I, at one point, moved the couch around so that we could sit and look out the great living room windows. As usual, I had my coffee in bed, which Stanley brought. He made for me and then didn't have to walk far to give it to me. We were able to sit outside and enjoy the birds. He had some bird houses out there. There's really nothing I can say that takes away from the value, the comfort, and the joy of living in this room. I loved waking up in the morning and finding out where was the water. Was it out? Was it tied in? Where were we at? It was beautiful. We took a walk along Strangford Loch, and one day we actually walked into Newtonards, which was the closest town. Unfortunately, I didn't have my walking shoes with me. They were in my suitcase. But I did manage. I had a pair of extra large shoes that I use when I go through the airport for security that I can slip off and on easily. I tied those to my feet while we walked into Newtonards. It was about an hour walk. And then finally, I decided to buy some clothing because after 5 days, I realized hand washing all my items. I'm not going to get my suitcase, even though everybody kept saying, "Oh, you'll get it. It will arrive. It will happen." But it didn't. This map will give you an idea of where we are or were. Northern Ireland is separate. It's still part of the British Empire. On the southern part, where you would find Dublin and so forth, they are a separate part of Ireland. They separated from the British. So you probably heard about years ago of fighting and so forth. Most of that is quit, but the northern part is still part of the UK. Next to the host's home, he had another little place up on a hill. Great gardens. He'd hired somebody to do all the landscaping for him. You'll find a lot of hedges marking territories and along the roadsides in Ireland. Hedges and, in many cases, stone walls. If you want a relaxing view of Ireland as I continue my walk, this early morning walk, you can continue watching this. The sunrise gradually gets up, and at one point I stand on a hill, turn around, and look back from where I came, and you can see the loch. If you don't want to watch this, fast forward. But it does give you a lovely view of the green countryside. When you fly over Ireland and you look down as you're beginning get to get closer to the airport, The whole landscape looks like a green quilt with all these patches of green and these hedges separating the borders of one person's land and the other. It's a beautiful sight. Usually, it's an overnight flight, at least from Toronto to you either fly into Dublin or into Scotland, as we did, and then you take an extra flight over. Down the road from our tiny house is the Mount Stewart House. It's a 19th century house and garden in County Down, Northern Ireland. Currently, it's owned by the National Trust. It's situated on the east shore of Strangford Lough, a few miles outside the town of Newtownards, and it was the Irish seat of the Stewart family, the Marquis of Londonderry. Beautiful, beautiful gardens.
Look at those. Look at those.
Aren't they pretty? I'm taking a video. You can move. Big full hydrangea bushes, eh? Maybe, maybe not. Living in a tiny home or small spaces, what does that do for your relationship? Well, it definitely brings you closer in physical proximity and potentially in your relationship. The close quarters of a tiny home or a mobile home can potentially foster a strong sense of intimacy and closeness between you and your partner. One might even say it brings you closer. And Stan says it brings you closer if you like them, it works well. So then I was thinking, well, if you don't like them, then you need to work on that. And you're going to find out. Why would you do that? A friend of mine has a friend who the couple were not getting along in their relationship. And for reasons that I can't explain, it just sort of mystifies me, they decided to buy a mobile home and live in it. And they did that for 2 years. So I asked my friend, well, what did that do for their relationship? If they didn't like each other to start, I'm thinking, why would they close in the space around them and then see how the relationship was going. And my friend said it didn't change their relationship. Things were the same. So for some reason, that couple continued the life patterns that they had, whether they had a lot of space or small spaces. And I'm also thinking, because I don't know the lady, but I'm thinking that maybe she was hoping that if they lived in smaller spaces, it might improve their relationship. Unfortunately, it didn't. But I think with the right attitude and changing certain routines in life, it is possible to improve the relationship. Living in small spaces requires collaboration and teamwork. So, with limited space, couples often need to collaborate and work together to keep the living environment organized and functional. And overall, it does promote teamwork. Each person's responsibilities tend to get designated. Preparing meals is one example. In the kitchen, Stan and I have a rule. If he's cooking, he gets to call the shots. If I'm cooking, I get to call it. In other words, he cooks the way he wants to, and I cook the way I want to. An example is potatoes. We do things differently, even over something small like that. He sets the pot on to boil and then turns it down to a medium to low setting and simmers the potatoes for I don't know how long, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour. I like a faster routine where I set the stove dial to more of a rapid boil. When mashing the potatoes, he leaves them a bit chunky. I like smooth. He uses margarine, I use butter. I use more milk than he does. The end result for either method is that we get nice, warm mashed potatoes. So that's the thing. We have to remember we have the same end goal in mind, and we are able to achieve it. Where we have different ways of doing things, as I mentioned, whoever is doing the cooking, that person gets to call the rules. We give way to one another, allow room to breathe within our own personality expressions. The teamwork, if I'm helping while he cooks, I take on the role of prep and clean. I'll cut and prepare vegetables for him, that is, if I'm helping at all. We each have designated, agreed upon roles, and that works. That works for any couple in any situation. You know what to expect. And you honor one another. It's obvious that living in small spaces means there will be some space constraints. In our current kitchen, we often find we have to do a dance to pass one another, going to the fridge or from the sink to the stove. There's not a lot of room, and in a mobile home, there's even less. We often approach this living constraint with a sense of humor. It might be a time for a hug or a reminder that, I do like you. These actions are good if we find we're getting on one another's nerves, which will happen from time to time. No matter how well you get along, transitioning to living in small spaces requires an adjustment period for both of you. The compact nature of tiny homes can amplify stressors. Effective communication and conflict resolution skills are crucial to navigating challenges successfully. Ultimately, the impact of living in a tiny home on a relationship depends on the couple's communication, flexibility, and shared values. It can even enhance closeness. If you've had the experience of living in small spaces with your partner and you want to share some of your thoughts and ideas, I'd appreciate hearing them. Send me your notes, and I'd like to read your comments, and I'll respond. Happy sharing, everybody.